The Galactic Empire had long believed that the age of humanity was over. After the catastrophic events of the Great War, records from ancient archives spoke of human civilizations being wiped out in a final devastating conflict. The last known human settlement had vanished into the black void of space centuries ago, and any lingering traces of their existence were nothing more than myths, whispers among the oldest scholars, and the oldest star maps. On the surface, the Empire had all but forgotten humanity. Their empire had grown stronger in the centuries that followed, swallowing up new worlds and annexing entire star systems. Yet, no one could shake the uneasy feeling that there was something unresolved about the old stories. The truth about humanity's demise remained elusive, like a question left unanswered, but no one dared to question the records of history. That was, until now. When the strange signals first arrived, there was no mistaking their origin. They were unlike anything the Empire had intercepted before. Odd, fragmented bursts of information filled with ancient, barely decipherable human syntax were detected by Imperial sensors on the edge of the galaxy. At first, they had dismissed the anomaly as an error, perhaps an echo of long-forgotten signals drifting from old, abandoned human colonies. But the frequency kept returning, persistent and almost deliberate. The Emperor, a man known for his calculated demeanor, ordered an investigation, but the truth of the signals would be far more significant than any had expected. The fleet dispatched to explore the source of the transmission was led by Captain Roll, a seasoned officer with decades of experience in navigating the farthest reaches of Imperial space. His ship, the Eclipse, cut through the void of space like a blade, a silent behemoth flanked by a squadron of smaller vessels. As they reached the coordinates, they found a long-abandoned world, its surface covered in the remnants of what appeared to be an ancient human settlement. The planet was unremarkable at first glance, dead, lifeless, and scarred by time. Massive canyons cut through the surface, and ash-colored ruins stretched across vast stretches of desert terrain. The only movement in the atmosphere came from the dust storms, which swept over the land like the last breath of a dying world. But as Rael and his crew began to investigate further, they found something that didn't belong. A signal, faint but clear, coming from deep beneath the surface. It was a cry for help, a message encoded in human language that even the Empire's advanced translators struggled to decode. Anomaly detected. The science officer aboard the Eclipse reported, his voice tense as he read the readings from the ship's console. It's coming from beneath the planet's crust. We're picking up a source of power, artificial in nature. Roll paused, glancing out at the desolate planet below, a sense of dread beginning to gnaw at him. Prepare an extraction team, he ordered. We need to find out what's down there. The Imperial ground team deployed, descending into the craters and ruins in search of the origin of the signal. Their journey took them deeper than any of them had anticipated, through ancient tunnels long forgotten, beneath layers of rock and dust. It wasn't until they reached the heart of an ancient underground city, hidden away for eons, that they made their discovery. In a chamber unlike anything they had seen before, they found it. A stasis chamber, sealed and protected by technology that was still active despite the passage of time. And inside the chamber, nestled in a tomb of ice, was the faint outline of a figure. Is it alive? One of the officers whispered. Rael stood frozen, staring at the sealed chamber. For the first time in years, his heart raced with anticipation and fear. Let's find out, he replied. The air in the underground chamber felt thick with the weight of forgotten history. The Imperial team moved carefully around the stasis chamber, its surface smooth and untouched by time. The team's leader, Captain Roll, stood at the forefront, his breath shallow as he stared at the mysterious figure inside. The chamber, despite its age, was still humming with a soft, almost imperceptible power, the light within casting an eerie glow across the room. We need to open it, Rel said, his voice sharp. His eyes never left the stasis chamber, as if the very sight of it commanded his attention. The officers moved into position, setting up the necessary equipment to disengage the ancient locks. The technology was unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered. Advanced, yet remarkably familiar, it spoke to an ingenuity beyond even their own. As they worked, the silence in the room deepened, and an uncomfortable realization began to settle in. Humanity's final days, the tales of their destruction, all of it. Was this the last piece of their legacy? With a final hiss, the chamber's seal released, and the doors began to slide open with a soft whine. Inside, lying perfectly still, was a human figure. She was dressed in what appeared to be a uniform, one that seemed centuries old but still intact. Her features were delicate, youthful, far too young to have been alive when the war that destroyed humanity had taken place. Captain Rahl stepped closer, his mind racing with questions. The Empire had long since abandoned any hope of finding living humans. What could this mean? He gestured for the medics to step forward, their specialized equipment designed to stabilize and revive anything that had been in stasis. They quickly went to work, but even as the first signs of life began to show in the woman's body, her chest rising and falling, Rahl couldn't shake the nagging thought that this discovery would change everything. Minutes passed, and then suddenly the woman's eyes fluttered open. She blinked a few times, disoriented, her gaze wandering over the faces of the Imperial officers surrounding her. When her eyes finally settled on Captain Rahl, she looked at him as if seeing him for the first time in centuries. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse, a whisper of sound that seemed too fragile for someone who had survived so long in isolation. Rahl took a careful step forward. "You're on an Imperial vessel," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Your stasis chamber. How long have you been in it?" The woman blinked again, as if the question took a moment to register. Her mind seemed to race, her brow furrowing with a mixture of confusion and something else, something deeper. I don't know," she said slowly. "I was waiting." "Waiting for what?" Rahl asked, his curiosity piqued despite himself. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at her hands, as though seeing them for the first time in a long time. Then, finally, she met Rahl's eyes. "For the Empire to come," she said softly, almost as if the words were as much a part of the past as her own memory. "I was supposed to wake up when it was safe, when humanity could return." Her words sent a jolt through Rahl's mind. Humanity could return. He had thought that their extinction had been an irreversible fact of history. The idea that there had been survivors all this time, that there was something more, was unthinkable. But here, in front of him, was a living human, a piece of history that had never truly been lost. Rahl swallowed. "What is your name?" he asked, trying to steady his thoughts. Her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that was unexpected. "Lyra," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I am Captain Lyra of the United Human Fleet." The room fell into silence as the implications of her words began to sink in. The myth was real. Humanity had not vanished into the annals of history. They had simply been waiting for the right moment to return. Rahl felt the weight of that realization like a stone in his chest. What did this mean for the Empire? What did it mean for the galaxy? "Welcome back, Captain Lyra," he said quietly, the gravity of the situation settling over him. "It seems your people have a lot of explaining to do." Captain Lyra sat up slowly, the sensation of gravity beneath her feet a strange and alien experience. Her limbs, stiff from centuries of stasis, felt foreign to her. She flexed her fingers, watching them with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. It had been so long since she had moved, since she had lived. The cold, sterile environment of the stasis chamber seemed so distant now, a faint memory, and the sterile white walls of the Imperial ship felt somehow suffocating in comparison. Captain Rahl watched her cautiously, his eyes narrowed. He had never seen anything like this before, a human waking after so long, carrying with her the weight of an entire species' history. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the ship's engines and the occasional click of the officers' equipment. Every movement Lyra made seemed significant, each gesture drawing more attention than the last. After a long moment, Lyra's gaze met Ral's. Her eyes, though bleary with confusion, were sharp, too sharp for someone who had been frozen in stasis for centuries. "What happened?" she asked softly, her voice cracking as if she hadn't spoken in an eternity. Rel cleared his throat. "You've been in stasis for, well, longer than we can measure. You're on an Imperial ship, and you were found on a forgotten human colony, buried beneath the surface of a dead planet." Lyra's brow furrowed, her mind racing as she processed the information. The shock of awakening, the disorienting sensations of a reality she hadn't known for centuries. It was almost too much to bear. Yet, she forced herself to focus. There was something important here. There always had been. "So it's true, then," she muttered, almost to herself. "The Empire. They're still here." Her voice grew more steady as the realization set in. "I never thought I would see them again." Ral's expression was unreadable. "The Empire is very much alive, yes. We've been searching for answers about humanity for some time now, and your discovery, well, it raises a lot of questions." Lyra took a breath and slowly swung her legs off the side of the table, standing on shaky feet. The world swayed around her, but she steadied herself. "I imagine it does. I was one of the last. My fleet, we were scattered, we escaped the war, but we never imagined we would wait this long." She paused, her voice almost a whisper. "We thought it would only be a few decades, maybe a century at most. But here I am, centuries later, and still, we are waiting." Rel shifted uncomfortably. Waiting for what? Lyra's eyes met his with a determination that pierced through the fog of confusion. "For the moment when we could return, when the galaxy was ready for us again." For a long moment, the room was silent. Ral's mind raced as he processed her words. A fleet of humans, waiting in the dark, scattered across the galaxy in hiding. The Empire had thought the humans were gone, erased from history. Yet here Lyra stood, as living proof that humanity's legend was not a myth but a reality, one that had been hiding, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Rel, ever the pragmatist, knew there was more to this than Lyra's simple words. What had the humans been waiting for? What had they become in all this time? "Tell me more," he asked, his voice firm but with a sense of awe. "Tell me what you know. What happened to the rest of your people?" Lyra's eyes seemed to darken with sorrow as she spoke. "Humanity's last days were a nightmare. We lost everything. Our worlds, our cities, our hope. The war nearly destroyed us. Those of us left were forced to adapt, to survive. But we had one goal, above all, to live again." She paused, almost as if reliving the pain of her people's last days. "And now, I see the Empire has not changed. The galaxy is still ruled by fear and control. If my people are to return, it will not be as subjects. We have waited too long for that." Ral's heart pounded in his chest. He had known of humanity's myth, the stories told by the Empire's historians, but hearing Lyra's words, seeing her so alive, so determined, filled him with a sense of urgency. The galaxy was about to change. And whether the Empire liked it or not, it would never be the same again. Lyra's words echoed in the silence of the room. Captain Rel, still trying to process the enormity of the situation, struggled to grasp the implications. Humanity had survived, but not only that, they had adapted, rebuilt, and hidden away, waiting for the galaxy to recover. But now, the galaxy had changed. The Empire had expanded, dominated, and established control. What would humanity's return mean? "Your people," Rel began, his voice low and thoughtful. "They've been living in isolation all these centuries. But why reveal yourselves now? What's changed?" Lyra met his gaze, her eyes unwavering, as though she had been anticipating this question. "The galaxy is no longer what it was," she said, her tone growing firm. "We can feel it. The imbalance. The Empire's grip is tightening, and the galaxy is starting to feel the weight of its rule. Humanity doesn't belong in the shadows anymore. We're ready to return, to reclaim what was taken from us. Raul's mind raced. The words Lyra spoke made sense in a way, but they also terrified him. What would it mean for the Empire if the lost humans were to suddenly resurface, with advanced technology and centuries of knowledge at their disposal? They had been hidden for so long, but they were here, and it was clear that Lyra believed their return would not just be a homecoming, it would be a reckoning. "We have something you don't understand yet," Lyra continued, her voice taking on an almost prophetic tone. "When humanity fled, we didn't just escape. We left behind the seeds of something far greater than any of you could have imagined. We scattered, yes, but we didn't just hide. We evolved. My people have perfected technologies beyond the comprehension of the Empire, ways of surviving, of thriving without ever being detected. We've learned how to bend the laws of nature itself." Raul was taken aback by her confidence, the sheer weight of her words. He had seen the advanced technology that humanity had once wielded. Impressive, certainly, but never had he thought of it as something beyond what the Empire possessed. What did Lyra mean by perfected technologies? How had they managed to hide from the most powerful force in the galaxy for centuries? "Are you telling me," Raul asked carefully, "that your people have had the power to confront the Empire this whole time, and simply chose to wait?" Lyra nodded solemnly, her expression serious. "Yes, but not without reason. We've waited because the time wasn't right. We needed to grow stronger, to rebuild our forces, to understand the galaxy once again. The war that nearly wiped us out was devastating, and we've learned from it. We're no longer the people we once were. The Empire's rule has created a new generation of humans, one that doesn't fear you, one that will not submit." Rail stood in stunned silence, his mind racing. The implications of what Lyra said were enormous. The human fleet, if it truly existed, would be far more formidable than anything the Empire had encountered before. The military superiority of the Empire had always been its greatest asset, but now, for the first time, Rel was beginning to understand that humanity was not just a relic of the past. They were a living, breathing force that had been waiting to rise. "You've been planning this for centuries," Rel said, his voice quiet but filled with awe. "The humans who fled, they weren't just trying to survive. They were preparing for a day like this." Lyra's eyes softened, but only briefly. "We were," she said, her voice tinged with regret. "And now, the day has come. The Empire must understand. Humanity never died. We've been waiting to reclaim our place in the galaxy, and we will do so on our terms." Rel felt a chill spread through him. For the first time in his life, he understood what true defiance looked like. The Empire had always considered itself unchallenged, its power unquestioned. But Lyra's words cut through that illusion like a blade. Humanity's return wasn't just an unexpected event. It was an upheaval. The status quo was about to be shattered. "What will you do now?" Raul asked, his voice barely a whisper, the weight of the question heavy in the air. Lyra stood tall, her face resolute. "We begin by revealing ourselves to the galaxy. And then, we show the Empire what happens when you underestimate humanity." Lyra's words ignited a fire within the crew of the Eclipse, and Captain Raul could feel it spreading. He had believed the Empire's might was absolute, that no force in the galaxy could challenge their rule. But now, in the face of Lyra's revelation, he saw the cracks beginning to form in that belief. Humanity was not just surviving. It was rising, evolving, preparing for something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. As the Eclipse traveled back to the Imperial Fleet's command center, Rel couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were already too late. News of Lyra's awakening spread quickly through the chain of command, sparking heated discussions among Imperial officers. Some believed that humanity was still too fragmented, too disorganized, to pose any serious threat. But others, the more seasoned and pragmatic officers, knew better. They knew that the last remnants of humanity had been far more than mere survivors. They were warriors, engineers and survivors in the truest sense. The Empire's immediate response was swift and brutal. The order came down from the Emperor himself. Find the humans, root them out, destroy them before they could build any meaningful force. No mercy. Meanwhile, Lyra had no intention of lying low. She had come to the conclusion that the time for waiting was over. She'd spent the last several centuries hidden, yes, but in that time, humanity had learned, adapted, and thrived. The resistance was not just a loose network anymore. It was a growing, organized force, with countless human colonies scattered across the galaxy, waiting for a signal. And now, that signal had been given. In the shadows of Imperial space, small rebel cells began to take action. Human ships, once thought to be ancient relics, began to show up on Imperial radars. They were equipped with technology that was on the edge of the Empire's comprehension. Faster than the speed of light travel, energy shields that could deflect Imperial weaponry, and stealth systems so advanced that the Imperial fleet's best ships couldn't track them. The first skirmishes between human and Imperial forces were brief but explosive. A small human fleet ambushed an Imperial convoy near the Corin system, disabling several capital ships and then disappearing into the vastness of space. The Empire, taken completely by surprise, scrambled to respond, but the humans were always a step ahead. It was clear now. Humanity's return was not just a question of survival. It was a declaration of war. Lyra, from the secretive command center of the human fleet, watched the reports with cold determination. Every move, every strike, was designed to send a clear message. Humanity was back, and they were not going to be silenced. The Empire, once thought invincible, had underestimated their resolve. Captain Raul watched these developments unfold with growing unease. Despite his own doubts about the Empire's capacity to deal with the humans, he couldn't help but be impressed by their tactics. They were relentless, precise, and utterly unpredictable. He knew that the Empire could not continue to ignore them for much longer. The rebellion had begun, and the first wave of humanity's counteroffensive was already in motion. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted his thoughts. "There's something else. Another transmission, coming from a system we've never heard of before." Raul's eyes narrowed. "What kind of transmission?" "Encoded in a format we haven't seen in centuries," the officer replied. It's human, sir." Raul felt a chill run down his spine. Humanity's full return wasn't just inevitable, it was unfolding right now. The Empire's greatest strength, its belief in unchallenged superiority, was now its greatest weakness. And as Lyra and the human forces launched their first major strikes, Raul knew that this was only the beginning. The spark of rebellion had been lit, and the fire was spreading across the galaxy. The Empire, for the first time in centuries, was facing a new kind of threat, one they had never prepared for. The Empire had never been this unsettled. The sudden appearance of human fleets, seemingly out of nowhere, was enough to rattle the very foundation of imperial control. For centuries, they had ruled with an iron fist, with no one daring to challenge them. Now, humanity's long-hidden survivors were making a forceful comeback. The Emperor, furious and unrelenting, knew that this insurrection could not be tolerated. The first wave of human attacks had been disruptive, but the Empire's might was still overwhelming. In response to the initial skirmishes, the Emperor issued an unprecedented decree: the total eradication of the human threat. No more hesitation. No more diplomatic negotiations. The Empire would show its strength in a way that would send a clear message to the galaxy. The rebellion would be crushed before it could spread any further. Rail stood at the helm of the Eclipse, watching as his ship entered the heart of the Imperial fleet. His orders were to lead the charge, to hunt down and eliminate the human forces wherever they appeared. But even as the fleet advanced, Rail felt a growing unease gnawing at him. The sheer tenacity of the human rebellion was unlike anything the Empire had ever faced. He had always believed the Empire was invincible, but now, the cracks were beginning to show. The orders came down from Imperial Command, swift, calculated, and ruthless. The Eclipse was deployed to the front lines of a crucial operation, to wipe out the human fleet's command base hidden in the Talisar system. The mission was simple: destroy the fleet, capture any survivors, and eliminate the leadership of the rebellion. But the more Roll thought about the humans, about Lyra and her words, the more he began to question everything. Could the Empire truly crush this rising force? Were they underestimating humanity's resilience? He glanced at the tactical map, marking the positions of both Imperial and human ships. The mission ahead would be dangerous, but it wasn't just military strategy that made him hesitate. There was something else. The cold, calculated strategy of the Empire was being tested in a way it never had before. As the Eclipse and its fleet jumped into the Talisar system, they encountered a surprising sight: a massive human fleet, far larger than anything they had faced before, was waiting. The ships weren't just scattered throughout the system. They were positioned, prepared. The human forces had set a trap. "Captain," the tactical officer reported urgently, "they're surrounding us. It's a coordinated assault." Raul's pulse quickened. The humans had anticipated their every move, setting a trap they had walked right into. The Empire had always prided itself on its superior military tactics, its ability to predict and dominate. But the humans were not only fighting back, they were outsmarting them. The opening salvos of the battle came in quick succession. Imperial ships were already taking hits, their shields flickering as human firepower tore through the fleet. "We can't hold this position, Captain," the first officer shouted, urgency in his voice. "They've deployed cloaked ships. We can't track them." Raul's eyes flickered across the battlefield, seeing the human ships moving in perfect sync, more advanced, more adaptable than anything the Empire had faced. Their stealth technology was far superior to anything the Empire had ever anticipated, making it nearly impossible to predict their next move. The battle was quickly turning in the humans' favor. "Withdraw. Now," Rail commanded. "We need to regroup and reconsider our tactics." But it was too late. Human ships, darting in and out of the fog of battle, disabled ship after ship in the Imperial fleet. The Eclipse, its engines damaged, struggled to escape the onslaught. The Imperial flagship, once a symbol of the Empire's dominance, was now caught in a losing battle against an unexpected and relentless force. Raul's thoughts were a blur as he gave orders, trying to stabilize the situation. The cold efficiency of the Empire's military might was faltering, and for the first time in his career, Rail felt the terrifying weight of being on the losing side. "Report now," Rail barked as explosions rocked the ship. The officer hesitated, then spoke in a strained voice. "Sir, we've lost communication with the rest of the fleet. We're on our own." Rail stared at the chaos unfolding before him, the unthinkable beginning to sink in. Humanity was not just a threat anymore. It was a force capable of defeating the Empire at its own game. His mind flashed to Lyra and her bold words. They were no longer hiding, no longer running. Humanity was here, and they were going to fight until the last. The Eclipse limped back to the Imperial fleet's command station, its hull riddled with scars from the human ambush. Captain Rull stood in the war room, his hands clenched at his sides, eyes glued to the holographic display of the galaxy. The Empire's once feared dominance was being eaten away at the edges. The humans weren't just fighting, they were outwitting them at every turn. The more Rull thought about it, the more it seemed as though they had never truly been prepared for this. "We've lost 30 ships, Captain," the tactical officer reported grimly. "And the fleet is in disarray. The humans have managed to isolate us in the Talisar system, cutting off our reinforcements." Rull clenched his fists. "I see. And how many human ships did we engage?" The officer hesitated. "More than we anticipated. We believe they're operating with 3 times the firepower we estimated. We're not just fighting guerrilla tactics, Captain. They're using military doctrine." The weight of the realization settled heavily on Raul's shoulders. The humans weren't just a ragtag resistance. They were organized. They were strategic. The Emperor's decree for swift eradication had proven disastrous, and now the entire Imperial fleet was on the defensive. "We need to strike back. Harder," Rail said through gritted teeth. "We cannot afford to lose any more ground. I want every available fleet in this sector mobilized immediately." As the officers around him scrambled to comply, Raul's mind raced. He had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. But even in the face of this mounting crisis, he couldn't shake the thought of Lyra. Her words, her conviction, they had stuck with him. Something about her confidence in humanity's strength had unsettled him. And now, it seemed to be haunting him in the quiet moments of doubt. Could they really win this? Before he could ponder the question further, the command room doors slid open, and a high-ranking officer entered with a grim expression on his face. "Captain Raul, we've just received an encrypted transmission from Imperial Command," the officer reported, holding up a datapad. "It's a directive from the Emperor himself. He's ordered a new course of action." Raul's brow furrowed. The Emperor had already issued one order to wipe out humanity. What more was there to say? What new course of action? The officer's voice dropped to a whisper. "The Emperor is invoking the Vanguard Protocol, Captain. He believes this threat is unlike anything we've encountered. He's assembling the highest command-level fleet, with full authorization to use experimental weaponry." Raul's stomach turned. The Vanguard Protocol was the Empire's last resort, a secretive and brutal set of procedures meant for total annihilation. It was something the Emperor had sworn to never activate, an admission of weakness, a declaration that all else had failed. "Experimental weaponry," Raul repeated. "You mean the quantum exterminators?" The officer nodded, his face pale. "Yes, sir. The quantum weapons are capable of erasing entire systems from existence. The Emperor is willing to use them if necessary, to ensure that humanity's rebellion is completely and utterly crushed." A chill ran down Rail's spine. The thought of using such devastating weapons felt like madness. The scale of destruction they could cause, wiping out entire human colonies, potentially entire worlds, was unimaginable. But the Emperor had already made his choice. The stakes had escalated. And now, it seemed as though there was no turning back. "Prepare the fleet," Rail said after a long, tense silence. "Activate the Vanguard Protocol. We strike them at their heart." The officer gave a solemn nod, and Raul turned back to the holographic display, his mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. He knew the Empire's power was undeniable, but as he looked at the scattered positions of the human fleets, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Empire might be playing into their hands. Humanity had shown time and time again that they could survive. But could they withstand this? As the orders went out across the Imperial fleet, the stage was set for the Empire's most devastating strike yet. The Empire would use its greatest weapons to annihilate the human threat. But at what cost? Was victory worth the price of wiping out a species that had already proven its resilience? As Raul's eyes fixed on the glowing map of the galaxy, he couldn't help but wonder if they were about to make a grave mistake. The Empire had underestimated humanity once. Would they do so again? The Imperial fleet was now ready, their most devastating weapon prepared for deployment. The Eclipse was at the forefront of the charge, its weapons primed for the coming assault. Captain Raul stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the galaxy map as the fleet approached its destination. A small human-controlled system on the outer rim, known as the Estras system. This was where humanity's fleet had gathered, where their forces were strongest. The Empire had decided that if they could destroy this last bastion, they could crush the rebellion once and for all. Raul could feel the tension in the air as the ship made its final approach. He had issued orders for the deployment of the quantum exterminator, the weapon that could wipe out entire planets in a single strike. The human fleet was positioned just beyond the range of their weapons, but it didn't matter. The exterminator was capable of decimating not just their ships, but entire worlds. "Captain," the tactical officer said, his voice tight with anxiety, "we've received an incoming transmission from the human fleet. They're requesting a ceasefire. They want to speak with you." Rel blinked in surprise. A ceasefire. After everything that had happened, it didn't make sense. His gut told him that this was just another trick, another attempt to buy time. But there was something in the message that made him hesitate. The voice was familiar. "Lyra, put it through," Rel ordered, his voice low. The holographic screen flickered, and Lyra's image materialized in front of him. She looked calm, even serene, despite the tension that hung thick in the air. Her eyes, however, betrayed a depth of concern that was impossible to ignore. "Captain Rel," she said, her voice steady but carrying an undeniable weight, "I know what you've come to do. I know you've been given orders to destroy us, to end this conflict in a single stroke. But before you do that, I need you to understand something." Rel's mind raced. He had heard her words before, but now they felt different. There was a finality to her tone. "What do you want, Lyra?" he asked, his voice tight with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "What I want is simple," she replied, her expression softening slightly. "I want you to understand that this war, this rebellion, it's not just about survival. It's about the future. Humanity doesn't seek domination, Captain. We never have. We've only sought to be free, to reclaim what was taken from us." Rel clenched his fists. "You think the Empire will simply allow you to return to the galaxy as though nothing happened? You've been hiding for centuries. Lyra, do you really think we'll just accept you back?" She shook her head, but there was no bitterness in her eyes, only resolve. "The Empire has already shown its true face, Captain. We're not asking for permission. We're fighting to live. And you're not just fighting us. You're fighting an idea. An idea that one day this galaxy will be free from the chains of the Empire." Her words struck something deep within him. Rel had always believed in the Empire's invincibility, but now, with the reality of what was at stake, he couldn't help but question everything he had been taught. Was the Empire really the force for peace and order it claimed to be? Or had they become the very thing they once sought to destroy? "You want me to believe that there's another way," Rel said, his voice quieter now. "But I have my orders." "I know," Lyra replied. "But it's not too late, Captain. You can choose the future. You can choose to stop this war before it destroys everything. If you let us live, we will fight alongside you, not against you. Together, we can build something better." Rel was silent for a long moment, the weight of his decision pressing down on him like an invisible force. The fleet was ready to fire. The exterminator was ready to annihilate the human forces. But in that moment, Captain Rel knew that the war could not be won through destruction alone. His hand hovered over the communication panel, the power to end everything in his grasp. The choice was his. "Captain, we've locked onto the coordinates," the tactical officer said urgently. "The exterminator is ready for launch." Rel's heart raced. He had to make a choice, one that would define the future of the galaxy. As the weight of the moment settled on him, he finally spoke, his voice steady, though filled with a sense of finality. "Cancel the attack," he ordered. The room fell silent, and for a moment, it felt as though the entire galaxy held its breath. Rel had made his decision. He had chosen the future, a future where humanity had a place, where the Empire's reign could no longer dictate the fates of all who lived beneath it. Lyra smiled, and for the first time, Captain Rel realized that humanity had never really been defeated. They had only been waiting for the right moment to rise again.